this is a slightly shorter format, or at least we're hoping it's going to be a slightly shorter format to some of the meetings we've had in the past. That is just me trying to endeavour to make these meetings slightly more accessible to the public. It is also just important to say at this point that we are in the middle of the public consultation around the police and crime plans, police, fire and crime plans. That consultation is going on at the moment. I was in Skipton to do that in the market on Monday. David was in Scarborough yesterday, David the Mayor, David Skaith. We're really keen to ensure that we get the widest possible range of views and thoughts into that process. As we're going to be setting the priorities for the next 4 years, and the deadline for any submissions on those priorities is the 18th of November. Also wanted to clarify at this point, just before we get started with the meeting, just the procedure and process for public questions. We're really grateful to those people who do either watch this meeting live or watch it when it's played back. It's a really important part of the scrutiny process and a really important part of my role to ensure that we build the best possible public confidence in our policing and fire services. But there are obviously limits on some of those public questions in terms of the things that we can respond to and deal with in a public session. So, for example, anything about an individual criminal matter or investigation could be asked, but we would respond to that privately to ensure that people's privacy is respected. We would also try and ensure that the questions that are being asked, we try and kind of respond to them in a way that addresses wider public issues so that we make these meetings as accessible as possible to the widest number of people. That guidance on those questions is on the website. So I think that was all I needed to say at the very beginning. We've got hopefully just over an hour to go through these sections. We're going to start with the police performance section. These slides are all available on the website, so we don't need to look at everything in detail. I'm very keen to go through the rural crime slides in detail because that is the spotlight main presentation, for today. But on performance, Scott, I don't know whether you want to put the slides up. I was certainly keen to have gone through the emergency call data because I know it's been something that has been a particular issue that's been raised in the past. So it'd be useful to see how we're doing on that. So if you wanted to just talk us through those slides from the beginning, and then when we get to the specific beyond police response and the crime levels, we can then perhaps I'll just pick out the bits that we need to talk through in more detail.
Yeah, if I pick out, thank you, Deputy Mayor, if I pick out the main areas then. So you've mentioned emergency performance 999. For those that have been to these meetings for a while or read HMIC reports, you know this has been an Achilles heel for the force in the past. And I think what we can now demonstrate is we're getting to a lot better level of consistency. When you look at that graph, you could think, oh, it's going a bit up and down, but the scale on the right is really important. That's kind of between 86 and 90%. It's very tight in terms of that performance. Number one, I suppose, to note is our target is 90%. We want to pick up all emergency 999 calls that are passed to us by BT, who answer all of them, then pass them to us within 10 seconds of being past them. And you can see, actually, we're getting closer to that level of consistency. I think it's important to note, particularly July, August and September is a busy period for policing, a busy summer, and yet the performance has stayed fairly strong. You'll see the line tick down in September, but it's just important to know it's still 89.5% in terms of the amount of calls answered. There's more work to do. We need to consistently get to 90%, but we're getting closer. And in the past 3 weeks, we've had an increase in the comms officers that have gone into the force control room to be able to help us with that performance, along with a whole host of other things that we offer to the public, which we'll come on to, particularly around 101.
Great.
Okay.
Just on 999, I know that there's been an ongoing issue with the time it takes for the call to be connected from BT. I just
Yeah,
wondered whether there was anything in terms of any kind of update on that, in terms of that delay, which I
yeah,
know does affect our performance in that area. So
yeah.
it is obviously, slightly frustrating to know that our call times dip because of that delay with the connection, but just anything work that's taking place in that area,
Yeah.
just in terms of any public reassurance on that delay.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is that the way that BT, so there's BT data that measures this performance as well. That's a manual system. So basically, if I'm passing the call to you and I'm the BT operator, I will press the button when you answer the phone in the FCR. Now, we've had a real focus, as you can imagine, within the room. You can see it from the performance that's being delivered on staff answering the call as quickly as they can when they sent it. And there's a real strong culture in there, and real credit to them that they continue to do that. But there's still a need to make sure that the call's passed in a timely way. And there is a variance in the time it takes between different forces around the country for that to happen. What I would counsel against is that there could be a case made that we need to also look at our technology as how quickly, once we receive the call, it then gives it to an operator. I am aware of a couple of forces that have tried to speed up that process and ended up losing calls within the system, and that is not something we want to do. But we are examining our technology to speed it up. So Catherine Clark, the ACC for local policing, continues to work with BT. I think we are getting close to formalising some action with them about the speed with which they can pass us those calls. Sorry, I can see the chief wants to come in.
Yes,
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah, and just to really add to what Scott says, and just to reassure you, this gets daily scrutiny at an executive level in the force. We have a report on it every single morning at 8:30 every day. We're constantly looking forward in terms of resourcing levels in the control room. In the medium term, the answer has got to be to make sure that we make sure the technology in our control room is the very best available. At the moment, it's probably just an inverse equation between the number of people you've got working in there and the number of calls that you get. There's definitely opportunities in the future to explore in terms of improving technology, and that's something that we're actively considering at the moment.
Great. And I think this is actually Emergency Control Week this week. So just to given that we're talking about their response times, just thanks to all those staff. I've been to both the police 999 control room and the fire control room over the last few weeks, and that is a really stressful place to be working, to ensure that those calls are answered quickly. So thank you to all of those staff that are working. I know that it's the same team that work across 999 and 101. So thanks to all of them for everything they're doing all the time, and not just during our kind of the time that we actually look at the data in these public meetings. Thanks, Scott. If you wanted to go on to the 101 calls, that'd be great.
Yeah, no problem. Again, historically, if you haven't got enough people to answer your 999 calls, this becomes even more difficult, because we will always prioritise 999 for obvious reasons, because normally people who need help very quickly. But 101 calls is important in terms of picking up that non-urgent demand. You can see on here, it's really important to know, and I'll repeat it because I know people join the meetings at different points. We changed the way that we measure, if you like, how our service level agreement compliance around 101 call. As you can see, in February this year, we changed it, and we changed it because there's national guidance that we are going to be measured again. So we thought it was sensible, well, we need to readjust how we hold ourselves up to scrutiny. So what you see on here is what we would now report into the Home Office with regards to our 101 performance. So what this means is the percentage articulates how many calls we pick up under 3 minutes, how many calls we actually answer under 3 minutes. That's the national SLA that's been set, and it's been set at 80%. You can see the line since February is just improving broadly month on month, and certainly in September we're up at that low 60s. One of the reasons for that is we've introduced a technical system where people can elect to have a call back later at a time that suits them. That affects, and this gets quite technical, I'll try and keep this really simple. that affects your discontinuance rate. That basically means when people hang up. So if people hang up within the 3 minutes when they've elected for a callback, that's a positive discontinuance, because we can then ring them back and we haven't lost the call. We don't know who's rung us. A negative discontinuance is people when just hang up outside those 3 minutes because they don't want to wait any longer. When we're inspected, and for the public, I think the worst thing for us is having somebody who just hangs up and we don't know that they've called us. We will ring them back. If they elect for a call back, we will ring them back, and they will get that call. So I encourage people to use the menu when you ring us if we don't pick up the phone under the 3 minutes. But what this is telling you, from a position of picking up the phone 40% of the time under 3 minutes, we're now heading into the 60s with some continued improvement. Again, this links to the number of people in the room. It's got daily scrutiny, just as the 9s have. The key measure for me is reducing people who hang up negatively. Yeah. That has to be the key measure. And if we can reduce that number, that will lead to us answering a higher number of calls, because people will have had them answered. So that's the important bit on that slide, but it's an improving picture, and the highest so far this year.
Great. Brilliant. And I just had a couple of things that I wanted to ask about, particularly around 101. One was whether or not there were particular times of day that were particularly high demand and challenges around 101. And again, because it's an improving picture, the other kind of, again, anecdotal stuff that I've picked up, and actually someone raised it with me in Skipton on Monday, was you kind of, if the picture is improving, you kind of need to reassert the communication around 101 and the need for people to use it as a communication channel alongside the online channels, to ensure that we kind of use that as part of our rebuild of public confidence and maintaining public confidence in that element of the service. My other question around that, apart from the times of day, was whether there's a way of discerning whether someone's calling from a landline or a mobile. Obviously, if you've got someone calling from a mobile, the online system is probably more available to them. They'll be more used to using technology. But if someone is calling from a landline, actually the chances are that they might have a level of kind of vulnerability in the community that might mean that they're going to wait for someone to pick up the phone in a way that someone on a mobile might not. And I don't know whether the technology currently allows for any of that differentiation.
We can see the number that people ring us on. It won't differentiate how it prioritises the call as a result of that. But the system does capture the number of people who ring us. There's probably a couple of points there. We still know that if we can improve the way we update victims, we will reduce demand on 101. So there's a high proportion of 101 calls are people who ring us for an update on a crime report or a matter that they might have reported to the police. So we've got to improve that, and that's where we're looking at technology to help us to do that, in terms of better victim contact and keeping people updated. 101 more broadly, we would expect this to improve as we get the resources in the room to the level that they ought to be at. And we know it's a tough job market down in York. That's why we've increased our salaries to the people that work in the control room to kind of compete with others. And the future's looking bright. We have those cohorts ready to join the organisation into the new year and into early spring. And we just need to get them in trained and actually doing a good job for the public.
Did you want to come in?
Yeah, just Deputy Mayor, just whenever we're talking about call handling, I always just want to make the point in a public meeting is, a couple of things is about, we prioritise 999 calls, just making sure that the 999 system is used properly for emergencies, because that's really, really important in terms of us using our resources in the best way for the public. But the second bit is, and it's happened to me in the past, sometimes mobile phones make a pocket dial to 999. Just an appeal to the public is, if it does happen, just stay online and tell us it's a pocket dial, because it's very quick for us to deal with them. There's no problem with it. If people put the phone down and we don't know what's happened, we then have to start making inquiries into it. So it was just really to put that across in a public forum.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And actually, that came up. I had that conversation when I was talking to the Youth Commission about the Police and Crime Plan consultation, and we had that conversation about staying on the line with pocket dials. It's actually saving time if you stay on the line, even though your actual natural instinct is to hang up and feel really terrible that you've pocket dialed 999. Actually, it's much better that people stay on the line, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just pick up a couple of questions you had, just very quickly? I know our peak for 101 calls is between 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon. And
Right.
we can track that because that links directly to average wait times. Depending what's going on the nines, if the nines are busy because of what's happening more broadly, then obviously the wait times get longer because we will always prioritise that 9 call. And then if you, just for people's information, if somebody elects for a ring back, on average, we will ring them back within about 35 minutes. On average.
Okay,
sometimes
that's
it
really
may be
good to know.
longer, but you know, you're not going to be waiting days.
Yeah, that's really helpful. We can skip forward a couple of slides unless there was something you particularly wanted to say. I was quite keen to talk about burglary, vehicle crime and knife crime briefly, if we could.
Yeah. So burglary was you can see this year actually, it's been a challenging picture for the force since about February. So consistently higher levels than we would have wanted to see. And certainly we had a real focus on throughout this year, and that's now starting to bear fruit. So certainly September saw a significant decrease. That is all about locking people up, charging them and managing them through the criminal justice system, doing a lot of prevention work, trying to prevent further victims through some good crime prevention advice. So burglary residential now, we are actually, for people's houses, we're slightly under the number that we recorded last year, but we'll remain focused on that through the rest of this year, as you would expect us to. It's not that we haven't been focused on it, it's we had a particularly problematic group of offenders. We do get cross-border offenders, both from West Yorkshire, Humberside and to the north, Cleveland. We have really robust plans around that and some fantastic results through specialist resources like roads policing and others. And then a good quality investigation means that we get this under control and where it should be for the public. So that's the improving picture on burglary. Our outcome rate is up by around 5% on residential burglary over last year, which is significant, but still much more to do in terms of improving investigation.
Yeah, and just to draw people's attention, in certain areas where we know that there have been particular issues with burglary, we have been providing ring doorbell services just to try and build that evidence picture, because ultimately one of the reasons for your outcome rates is you need to be able to have evidence of what may have happened and who the perpetrators might be, and the ring doorbells are really helpful in that evidence picture, and certainly
Absolutely.
some of our high burglary areas have had correspondents inviting them or offering them those ring doorbells if they don't have them at the moment, but it's certainly something that if people are concerned about it, that they should look at, just because it means that if it does happen and people are unfortunate enough to be targeted like that, then there is much more chance of a positive outcome in terms of people being caught, isn't there?
There is, and we do put appeals out on Community Messenger actually about asking people to check the ring doorbell, because it only needs a single bit of footage with a car or somebody that's caught on it that can really help us then target those offenders.
Great. Would it be all right to just jump forward to knife crime? And just the outcome rate in particular was what I was worried about or wanted to ask you about.
Yeah, okay. So it's important to understand the context around knife crime. So I think most people have in their mind this is either a violent robbery or an assault or something of that nature. Sometimes it is. Sometimes they are used in the commission of crime. Other times we may well have been proactive in terms of taking knives off people, stop searching them. Certainly this year, we've had a couple of instances in certain areas of the force where we've put an enhanced level of stop search power in called a Section 60, where we will proactively search people for weapons where we believe there could be a chance of serious violence occurring. So the context to knife crime reporting is complex. It's not as simple as people might add up in their own minds. When we look at the outcomes, that of course is when you can see the list of outcomes on there, where we look at conducting investigations, where we look at what the evidence is in terms of the crime that's been committed, and then linking that to a positive outcome. Usually, where knives are involved, there will be the more serious end. There will be either robberies or assault. It could be domestic violence where we see knives used. And we know particularly that remains a challenging area around securing criminal justice outcomes and getting the right outcome for the victim. So it's a complex picture. We can do some more work on that if that's something that you're interested in, to bring back a fuller kind of a fuller picture than perhaps this slide presents.
No, I mean, the slide, it's not unhelpful, the slide. The only question I suppose I have also was that there was new guidance, I think it was, around surrender of knives that came in, I think since the last time we had one of these meetings, so possibly in the beginning of the autumn, just really how impactful that might have been for us in York and North Yorkshire, or whether that's had any impact from a kind of policing point of view in terms of, you know, what you might be seeing happening on the street or for officers on the ground. We've
had a low number of knives. These are the zombie knives, aren't they? There was the amnesty, if you like, for handing in. We've had a low number. It doesn't tend to be how do I put this, a weapon of choice in North Yorkshire. There does tend to be younger people and those organised in organised crime who will carry them, and of course they're less likely to surrender that type of weapon. There was a lot of work done with a retail premises in Scarborough about how they were selling that kind of object, and we'd certainly had a number of families over the summer that had attended that shop on holiday that we then engaged with around buying that kind of thing. But you'll know there's a compensation scheme for retailers as well around that. So I would say we've had a relatively low number surrendered as part of the amnesty. But of course you can't be complacent. It's not something we see commonly, but there are certain groups in North Yorkshire who will or may carry them.
Yeah, and actually, you know, all of them, any and all of them that are off the streets is obviously a step in the right direction, isn't it? So
yeah,
that's really positive. Thank you. I think in terms of questions that I had, I didn't have any particular questions on the other slides. They're on the website if people want to look at them. Unless there was anything else that you wanted to raise on performance, I am happy to move on to the next section.
I think the only point I would make, Deputy Mayor, is that you know, in terms of the direction of travel at the force at the moment, we are arresting more people than we were last year. We are prosecuting more people than we were last year, and that's manifesting itself in improved outcomes for the public. In recorded crime this year to date is 4.5% less than it was this time last year, crime in its totality. And in certain categories of crime, things like robbery, we're seeing very, very significant reductions. And likewise, we're seeing significant reductions in recorded antisocial behaviour across the county, some of which undoubtedly, and you may want to talk about it on another online meeting, is about the money from the Home Office that came in through via your office, to provide targeted patrols around ASB hotspots around the county. So a positive picture at the moment. Always more to do, but a positive picture.
Brilliant, thank you. That's great. And the performance update is a regular slot anyway, isn't it, on these meetings? So we can pick those things up at the next policing meeting, which I assume is January time. Right, if it's all right with everyone, we will move on to the main presentation, which is on rural and wildlife crime. I think we've got some slides. I'm happy to have a bit longer on this because this isn't something that happens in every meeting.
Can I perhaps introduce
yes, please do.
So obviously we brought Andy Berryman, who's Head of Specialist Operations, along today, and Mark Earnshaw from our Rural Task Force. I had the pleasure of going out on patrol with Mark and his colleagues a couple of weeks ago, because this is a new area of policing for me. What I'd say to you is Mark and his team are absolute experts on this, and they are very, very passionate about this area of crime. So I hope today really gives you a good sense of the work that they do. What I think I'd say to you is it's not the totality of what they do, because there's a broader policing effort around this. So I hope what you hear today is of use in terms of understanding the work that Mark and his team do.
Yes, brilliant. And I also have had the pleasure of going out with the Rural Task Force team and just meeting with a farmer to talk about the risks that they had on their property and what they might be able to do to mitigate some of those. So yes, I'm really interested in this. So I don't know, is it Marky, whoever's leading, do you want to kick off and talk us through? I don't think I've got a question until around slide 6, if that helps. You want to just talk? Oh no, I've got a question about the charts themselves. So slide 4, I've got a question, but until then, you can just crack on and talk us through it.
That's no problem. You'll just you may have to shout to remind me as I go along. So, Mr. Berriman, did you want an opening gambit?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I'm Andy Berriman. Chief has obviously introduced me, Head of Specialist Operations. So Rural Task Force sits within my directorate, and they are obviously spread around the force, do a fantastic job. It's fair to say we're one of the few forces that have got a dedicated resource around rural policing. Some forces have it sat within neighbourhood policing teams, but our Rural Task Force sits with us, and they've got the full force of specialist operations behind them to support operations such as roads policing, operational support unit and firearms support unit as well. So they've got the full backing of us, and we support many operations across North Yorkshire. So with that introduction, I'll hand over to Mark, and if you're an avid Country File viewer, you might recognise Mark, because he represented North Yorkshire last year on Country File, and was talking to some of the challenges that we face. So
and I think there are some slides, aren't there?
Yeah, we've got some slides now to talk through. So I'll hand over to Mark, and he's, as the Chief says, an expert in this field.
Brilliant.
We'll lead you through it. Thanks, Mark.
Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, that's great.
The Rural Task Force, I'm Mark Earnshaw, I'm the sergeant on the team. I think it's just an overview of rural crime and where North Yorkshire Police fits and where our actions in relation to that as we go through. Rural crime, it's important to know what rural crime is. There's been a lot of discussion nationally of what rural crime is, and they like to look for a reference point. So what we like to say is an offence that relates to farms, agriculture, wildlife, the environment, heritage sites that are targeted due to their isolation of rural location. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but ultimately they are isolated by the rural location. North Yorkshire, what are our challenges? I always think of North Yorkshire, our challenge is geography. It's the largest area, force area in the country by land mass. And what I always like to do at presentations is the area of Craven on the bottom left-hand corner is the same geographical footprint as the whole of West Yorkshire Police. Now, there are a lot less people in North Yorkshire, but that doesn't mean that all our people in North Yorkshire don't deserve to have to be policed and to have a response from us, from all of us. So it's about identifying rural problems, and as the Chief said and the Deputy earlier on, we are surrounded by large areas, Middlesbrough to the north, Leeds and Bradford to the south. So we do have a lot of urban areas that like to come into our force area and take our high value rural assets. So about 4 years ago, we started to look at the Rural Task Force, and we relaunched, and it was a real focus on who we were and what we do. To give you a general overview, I think we're a little bit lost. We refocused and relaunched, and those 5 areas there, 1 to 5, give us a definite structure of what we focus on and deal with on a daily basis. Now, if you think of us as like subject matter experts, and it's offering support, especially to safer neighbourhoods, but to other members of the force, we can't deal with everything. We can't be everywhere, but what we can do is to give people like assurances and expertise in relation to those 5 areas. So poaching was a significant problem for us. I'll talk about that slightly later on. High harm offenders, organised crime groups, cross-border criminals in both wildlife and rural crime. We focus on those. Building cross-border relationships, which I'll touch on again a little bit later on. And it's about, we can't do that without working with our partners. Developing community networks, loads of work on that. Again, I'll speak a little bit later on, but it's about building. We've done an awful lot of work building WhatsApp groups in our rural areas, and that's about neighbourhood watch schemes, but bringing it into the modern day, and tactical support to commands, which is like the TACAD approach to crimes and wildlife crimes. Sorry.
Yep, you're all good. Thanks. Carry on.
Yeah. So when we did the relaunch, one of the only 2 forces in the country that actually separate out our rural crime. And what does that actually mean for us? It means that we can identify where our rural crime problems are and how we can best place our resources to tackle those crimes. And we do that by running log systems. So we pull crimes off that are identified as specifically rural, and then we map them onto a mapping system. The mapping system gives us a visualization of where crime is happening, and we can identify hotspot areas. And by being embedded in specialist ops resources, we can put people, not lifetime, but fairly quick response, like within a month or sooner, if we identify that problem sooner, to try and tackle those areas. You're not going to be everywhere. You can't possibly be everywhere and anywhere. The area is just too big. So it's about identifying those problem areas and focusing in on those areas. And that's what we try and do by using this hotspot mapping system. That's a visualization of what we use, but the running logs are actually a list of crimes, and we can look more in depth into those and try and identify offenders and things like that.
Brilliant. So I just had a quick question about that that chart, because I've been shown that chart, as I'm sure other colleagues have as well. So if you could just give us a couple of the examples of the things, the different coloured dots, and what those represent, because I think my understanding was some of that was around recording of things that have happened, and some of that will be prevention, I think. But if you could just talk us through a couple of the examples and what that might mean in a kind of rural kind of sense, because they're different colours for different reasons, aren't they?
Yeah. This is actually it's a shot off the actual live crime map, but the map is alive. It's a living event that you can go in and out of. You can look at each individual colour if you like, and all these different little coloured marks are in different interpretations of the list of rural crimes that we have. Green are poaching events, red are vehicle thefts or burglaries. So we can tick the boxes or knock in and out of the boxes so we can identify which particular crime types. We can also look at different things like suspects incidents, burglaries, thefts. So it gives us an idea. So if you talk about poaching, you can just look at poaching. You can look where the events are and try and target your people in those particular areas. We've got an ongoing like quad bike problem, say. We can look at the quad bike problems, look where they're going, look where the thefts are, and we've had clear identification of like problem areas to target that particular area. It is really helpful and useful to know. I mean, if I put every rural crime on there for the last 3 months, there'd be just too much information to take in. So it's about looking at the different offenders, the different times of day, the different targeted offences, and actually doing a targeted response to whatever we're looking at.
And just again, just because I'm not sure what's publicly available and what I've been shown, but just to pick up on, I can't remember whether it was the Chief Constable or the Assistant Chief Constable's, Deputy Chief Constable's point about the amount of crime that we get that potentially comes over a border into us. This is one of those maps that paints that picture really clearly in terms of the areas where we might be bordering another area along a particular road, for example, where you might see a particular issue. And as you said really clearly, then it's then an opportunity for the team to be able to go out there and make sure that farms and other businesses in that area are aware that kind of thing might be going on, and they can then kind of make make efforts to be as protected as they possibly can be if there's been a spate of a particular crime type in a particular area.
Yep, absolutely. It also helps as a part of, we've got two sides to our role. We've got like an enforcement and a target hardening. We have PCSOs and PCs. And what it enables us to do is follow up on crime types. So we will do target hardening. We will visit crimes, or if we see potential crime types that are emerging, we can target areas that we think are going to be targeted, or particular crime types, which we have done. And that's about identifying what problems we've got, where it's happening, and what we're going to do about it. And that's what we didn't know until we started actually looking into it.
It's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. And at the moment, that is just something that the team uses to identify things. That is not something that would otherwise be in the public domain.
No, it's not in the public domain, but it's in the force domain. It's available for all officers to use. So we share it with ours, but we also have it's available for other ops resources and safer neighbourhoods resources, and so other departments can target where the offences are taking place.
Great.
Mr.
Scott.
Bissett?
Yeah, thanks. Just to support what Mark's saying there, it's not unusual that, as you'd expect, that in the more rural areas, the neighbourhood policing teams will use this as well. I'm sure Mark will bear that out. You know, certainly aware of cracking bits of work up in the north of the county, across in Craven, where local teams use this information to target their own activity.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you. Yeah, and sorry,
Mr. Berryman.
Mr. Berryman.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, just to add as well, this also feeds into our monthly force tactical tasking and coordination group. So where we discuss all crime trends across the force. So some of these will feature in there, particularly at the moment running Operation Alibi, which is the top end of the force, looking at quad bike thefts and other sort of travelling criminals coming in. And we do, and Mark will cover it in his presentation as we come along, how we share that intelligence.
Brilliant. Right, let's yeah, you can carry on. Thank you.
Thank you. We work closely nationally, National Wildlife Crime Unit and the National Rural Crime Unit. The National Rural Crime Unit are fairly new, but I think they've definitely been a game changer. Working nationally to their main directives, their main priorities that are listed there. I won't go into them all now, but we do work closely. We're embedded in those two organisations, and ultimately it's about information sharing and best practice. And if we're all nationally, and we don't all nationally sing off the same hymn sheet, but certainly if we do closer working relationships, then we can look at targeting offenders that impact on us from a national point of view.
Yeah, that's great.
This is one of the successes when the team started, and it's an ongoing issue. Poaching was a huge problem in North Yorkshire. It was the second only reported crime to theft. The poaching, I think if you didn't know a lot about it, you might think about clawed green grass, taking a pheasant for the pot. That's not what we're talking about. It's organised. It's particularly apparent with the way that the impact on the communities from their rural location. When they come in the middle of the night in the vehicles, they drive across crops and damage gates and let livestock out, etc., etc., etc. So we've really strong targeting in this. We were a forefront leader in using antisocial behaviour legislation. It's now a national programme and we've seen a 61% reduction since we started this in 2020 on our poaching figures and on reported incidents. I mean, we don't sit on our laurels. That's a visual representation of where we've been and where we're at. It always goes up in the back end of the year once they've cut the crops. I think in the last year it's been particularly wet. I think it's not all down to us, but I think we have had significant success. I think COVID made a big difference. Did it drive people away from that particular venture? I'm not sure, but it's not something we stopped doing, but it's certainly something that we have seen a great deal of success with.
It's really positive, not least because it's such an important industry for some of our farmers.
GPS thefts Operation Walrus is a national operation. I think this I've put this in and I wanted to talk about it because it's from a national level. It's a success that we've been involved with, but we noticed a significant rise in GPS is go on tractors. And when I went with Mr. Forber, we went to the farmer, and these are vital for infrastructure and food production for the country nationally. And there's been a huge amounts of theft right across the country, a national problem. We noticed the thefts start to rise at sort of the start of 2023. Last year we had 54 of these units stolen in North Yorkshire. They range between £10,000 and £30,000 a piece. We didn't know who was doing it. We didn't know why they were doing it. We didn't know where they were going. Working with our partners nationally, a huge amount of work went into it. We've had a number of significant arrests. Improve that picture with the National Rural Crime Unit. We recovered 48 units, £300,000 with that's working with our partners in Humberside as well. And this year to date, we've had 14 units stolen. And I think that's about our response. It's about knowing now who's committing the crime, that when they do commit the crime, we can come together and work with our partners to target those people, get them arrested and put before the court. So
yeah.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, I mean, I think what this illustrates to me is there's a real opportunity to design out this crime. 20 years ago, we used to have car stereos stolen all the time, window smashed in, pull the stereo out, cars are gone. Doesn't happen now because car multimedia stuff is all integrated into the dashboard. It was designed out. Likewise, you know, maybe 15 years ago, we used to have lots of the old stick in your windscreen sat nav stolen from cars. It doesn't happen now because most people don't have them. It's integrated into your car. And there's definitely an opportunity to, I think, influence the manufacturers of tractors and other agricultural equipment to get this sort of equipment integrated within the actual vehicles themselves. Now, I know there's an expense issue and all of that, but that takes influence both, you know, through the NPCC, but also through the APCC and the Home Office to influence manufacturers in this regard, because it is something that needs to be designed out.
Yeah, and I'm now also going to be sitting on the group of police and crime commissioners and deputy mayors who cover rural areas, so that I'll be able to make those representations as well in the more political direction, and that we've just to also say, as I did over burglary, this is also an area where we've had a particular programme from my office around supporting rural communities to mark their equipment with the special marking kits that are available, so that actually if someone does steal one of these valuable units, actually they won't know whether it's marked or not, but it would mean that if we find it, we'll know whose it belonged to. So it again, I completely agree with you, Chief Constable. This is something where in 10 years' time, this may be in a different place because vehicles will be designed differently. But at the moment, we're just doing everything we can from our side of things to try and do the prevention side. And then obviously from the policing side, you know, officers are doing the best that they can to try and ensure that we track the work that's going on and where thefts are taking place, and you know that if we can, we recover people's property and return it to them. But it is a really significant it's an important crime, but it's also a really significant piece of work that the Rural Task Force have been doing. So thank you for drawing it to our attention.
Thank you. Along the same sort of lines is the quad bike theft, Chief Constable certainly brought out there. I've spoken to him about the Equipment Theft Prevention Bill, and that's something that I know the National Rural Crime Unit have been pushing, and it is a constant frustration to myself that quad bikes are fitted with moped technology from the 1980s, and the keys that they use to use them, it's just so outdated. And they could solve that problem, but they don't. They won't. And I know there was a bill trying to go through Parliament to prevent that, and that got stalled with a change in the government. So hopefully that's something that can push and assist us, because quad bikes continue to be a problem for us. We saw a dip through COVID. We saw a dip year on year, and then last year we went back up to pre-COVID levels. We've seen a slight dip on the number of quad bikes that get stolen, but it is a constant problem to us. We've lost a lot. I think we've spoken about Opalibai at the Northern County, where they go over into Middlesbrough and used in antisocial behaviour and crime. We do get quite a few back, but then quite a few more get stolen. So.
Yeah, that's great. No, I mean, I think it just points to the points we've just been making about, and these are really important pieces of equipment for farmers and rural communities to kind of look after their businesses. So, yeah, ensuring that we do the most we can to prevent it happening, but also to follow up afterwards. Chief Constable, do you want to come in?
Just really to reinforce this point that Mark makes around the prevention stuff. We've got to do something about that. The challenge is again with the widespread of the geography. The only way to target this is through prevention and designing it out. So whatever can be done through the APCC and likewise through the NPCC, I think you and I probably need to be of one voice in this regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, you can move on, I think.
And this is the piece of work that you spoke about. It was in conjunction with your office and my officers that have done this. This on our mapping system highlights. Previously on the Safer Streets campaign, we've had specific areas. So we've done work in the Selby district, the Craven and Harrogate district. This year, the Safer Streets was a property marking of vehicles and farm machinery. We've visited 1,500 farms and given out 8,000 kits. It's a huge undertaking piece of work, and we've also done training in force and in our surrounding forces with the DNA marking kits and identification of those kits. It's what you spoke about. It's about getting that stolen property back to its rightful owner if it is unfortunately stolen. And while we've been doing that prevention work, it enables us to go into the farm so we can offer other crime prevention advice, but also offer families in a particularly difficult place at the moment. It sits where financially it's got all sorts of competing pressures. Leaving the EU has been one of them, certainly. And so debt relief, suicide prevention, farm support, domestic violence, they're sort of things that we've been trained on, that we're offering support in. And most of our team I myself come from a farming community, and farming communities like to speak to other members of farming communities. So it's embedded in that. It gives us the opportunity to speak to people and sort of spread the word in relation to all sorts of crime prevention and target hardening.
Great. Yeah, no, and I think that map kind of tells the story, really, doesn't it, about the scale of the work that's going on. Although I think when I saw that map the first time, I was kind of asking what that meant in terms of what there still was to do, and there's still quite a lot to do. But it is still an incredibly impressive piece of work to have got round all of those farms, and each one of those farms will be a business, keeping the cogs of the national economy turning. So it's really important kind of work that the team are doing in trying to kind of get that prevention work kind of maintained and building on it all the time.
A really important part of our ongoing work as well is cross-border cooperation. This is just a small part of it. Operation Hawkeye, 6 forces. We meet bi-monthly, and that's about intelligence sharing ultimately, and building operations into working cross-border. So at the moment, we've been spending a lot of time in Cleveland and Cumbria over that border and targeting the same offenders that challenge both areas. We try and work with all our partners across borders, so Humberside, Lancashire, Cumbria, West Yorkshire as well. They don't have any sort of rural crime footprint. I know there's a lot of push to try and get that done because a lot of their offenders do come on to us. Hopefully that'll be something that'll progress in the future, but I think that's important work, and it's work that we'll continue to do. Wildlife crime is another aspect of what we do there. The 6 national wildlife crime priorities. I won't necessarily go into all of them there. They don't all fit in to North Yorkshire. Freshwater pearl mussels aren't something that we have a huge amount of, but other force areas do. And what that does is the team are able, any officer can deal with wildlife crime, but if we've got the connections with the National Wildlife Crime Unit, all our officers are wildlife trained. It enables us to deal with crime and incidents. Birds of prey persecution has been in the news over the last few days. The RSPB's Raptor Wildlife Crime Report has come out. So it's something that we do deal with. We are heavily involved with. We've had significant success this year trying to build relationships. It is difficult because people's views do tend to be polarized, but you can only build change from within. So it's about trying to build those relationships and move things forward.
Yeah, and I think I'll just say on this slide and the kind of couple that are coming up, I guess my question is, that ultimately this is about upholding the law and ensuring that people are aware of what is and isn't the law, and that your job as the police in this space is to uphold the law, and that obviously is what you need to do within the balances of other people might have differing views, but the law is ultimately what your job is to uphold, and that's what officers will always be trying to do. And it's really important that people are kind of alive to and sensitive to the regardless of their opinions, that's your job, and that's what you'll always be doing. And I think when you're talking about some of these particular crime types, that does become really important, doesn't it? And just making sure that people are kind of aware of that being your role.
I think impartiality is the word, isn't it?
Yeah.
We deal with all crime that's presented to us, and we deal with it with an impartial view, and that's really, really important. And we have to deal with the evidence that's put before us.
Chief Constable, do you want to come in?
Well, I just wanted to reinforce that point as the Chief Constable, because ultimately that's the purpose of my role, to make sure that the law is upheld and it's done without fear or favour and it's done independently. And I can assure you that in my tenure, that's exactly what will happen.
Great, thank you. Do you want to carry on through the hunting slides?
Yeah, hunting with hounds, obviously. Hunting with hounds is an illegal act. Hunting mammals with dogs, except for various exceptions. We will maintain impartial and take proportionate action where evidence exists and an offence is committed. The Rural Task Force maintain an advisory role. We try and look at all fox hunting jobs on the Rural Task Force to give that general overview. All police officers can investigate wildlife crime, and it's about keeping that overview and offering advice in relation to specific offences.
Yeah, thanks.
Operation Recall, I wanted to put this in, that we've seen a significant number of attacks on wildlife by domesticated dogs since COVID. Number of people being dog owners in COVID shot up through the roof. This does have an impact on our national infrastructure, and it's quite a distressing crime for livestock owners. And I'm a dog owner. I love my dog, but at the end of the day, it's about controlling your dog, isn't it? It's about dealing with those, and education. A lot of it's about education. So this is a national programme, RSPB and a number of other partners, and it's about increased awareness, education, to make all animals safe, and ultimately reduce the number of attacks on livestock.
Exactly, and I think the other thing is, those signs that you see when people are out in the countryside about keeping dogs on leads, they aren't there because someone's trying to be awkward. They'll be there because someone's trying to protect either some form of wildlife or some kind of wild stock on a farm. And I think, as you say, some of that education around just that balance of respect, and also trying to protect dog owners from being in a position where they might be prosecuted if their dog gets out of control. Ultimately, if your dog isn't under control, it's not the dog's fault. It'll be the owner's fault. So it's those measures really, and just ensuring that education and awareness is there. But yeah, this again, like you say, really important, and as you say, also probably a growing problem for us.
And lastly, you may be pleased to know, is new technology and just some of the things that we're doing on the team and we have on the team that enable us to conduct our role. We have a drone capability, we have night vision, and we use those successfully in all sorts of crime types, especially out and about on an evening, on a night when it's dark. We work a lot with our OSU colleagues, operational colleagues looking for missing people, and it's about those community networks as well. Nobody knows the land better than the farmers and the gamekeepers. They often have better kit than us, and if we've got a missing person in the Dales, who better to call on than the people that we to come and assist us looking for those people, because they have the knowledge, they have the ability. So we do that. The detection dog is one that's down on the moor that we've used, and that's the data DNA marking kit that we've issued and sent out across all the farms.
Brilliant, that's great. That's really comprehensive and extremely helpful. Thank you so much for that. I think we can move on to a couple of spotlight issues that I was going to raise with officers. One of them was just to ask whether it was possible to have an update on North Yorkshire Police's involvement nationally around the disorder that took place over the summer. And then separately, two separate questions. One, just anything again from a policing perspective around the early release of prisoners and any impact that might have had on police resourcing. Around the enforcement of some of that in terms of recalls, if that was what was going on, but just anything that either any of the officers wanted to add on any of those two issues they felt particularly pertinent since the summer.
Yeah, I'll answer both those, Deputy Mayor. So if I take the disorder over the summer, we didn't have any outbreak of disorder in North Yorkshire. We had a couple of incidents that were connected on the fringe of it, but nothing that wasn't handled swiftly and they resulted in people being charged very quickly. In particular, an incident outside a mosque in Scarborough. But we did have officers deployed to Rotherham for the disturbance that got a lot of media coverage. Officers were deployed in the front line of that disorder and discharged themselves very, very bravely in those circumstances. And likewise, we had officers deployed up to Hartlepool. Nationally, we contributed to the National Strategic Policing Reserve, and nationally policing put over 6,500 officers on reserve within 48 hours, which is a considerable feat. The commentary from the military has been that they would have been unable to do that at the time that we managed to achieve that locally. And officers from North Yorkshire Police contributed to that. The entire force, the majority of the force went to rest day working. So that'd be, instead of having 4 on 4, we work a 12-hour shift pattern, 4 on 4 off. We went to 6 on 2 off. That gave us extra resources to be able to put out, both in terms of contributing to the strategic reserve, but actually put out more visible resources to reassure our communities. And they were engaged principally around foot patrol around the major population centres. I was out myself, went out on foot patrol in York, in Harrogate and in Skipton. I had the opportunity to visit a number of mosques to speak to the imams and reassure them that absolutely North Yorkshire Police is on the side of communities and on the side of people who are vulnerable. I think all in all, our presence was well received by the community. No officers in North Yorkshire were injured during that period, but it was an exceptionally busy period for us because, as you were aware, whilst all that was going on, we had an ongoing operation at Drax Power Station, which we've been planning for several months. That was also a very resource-intensive operation. I think that the fact that the force managed to deliver that operation successfully meant that there was no disorder anywhere within the county, and we, to the greatest possible degree, maintained business as usual at a good level, is a reflection of how hard the force worked, and I'm very, very proud of everyone who contributed to that effort. So that was the first bit. Sorry, do you want to ask me?
No, I was just going to echo your sentiments around that in particular. Just, you know, I was only a few weeks in at that point, and it was suddenly everything was going on everywhere, and certainly the officers' response was complete professionalism. People just carried on. Holidays got cancelled, as you said, rest days got cancelled. People just carried on doing their amazing public service to keep everyone safe. And I think, you know, we saw the absolute best of our police officers here and in other areas at that time, just in terms of the work that they were doing. Scott, did you want to come in?
Sorry, yeah, just in support of the chief. I think one of the interesting things that came out of the summer was not forgetting that yes, the communities are incredibly, you know, at the forefront of everything that we do, but we had members of staff who work in the force who lived in those areas, lived on the streets of some of those areas where you saw serious disorder, and not losing the sight of when we take the uniform off or take the suit off if we're a detective, that we all live in those communities, and you bring that kind of experience to work with you. I think that was really an important element over the summer that we learned a lot from.
Yeah, no, it was, like I said, I was a few weeks in, but it was a really impressive kind of manifestation of public service. So yeah, thanks to all those officers. And then just on the early release.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's something that we're aware of. We're participating in the national group, so we know the numbers that are coming out early and who they are. Relatively small numbers here in North Yorkshire. In terms of how we manage it, you know, these people will be coming out of prison at some point anyway, and we manage it in the same way in terms of working with probation, making sure that we've got offender management plans around those that are most likely to reoffend. And thus far, it's not caused us any significant issues. A very, very clear message, though, is that if these people come out and reoffend, they'll be getting arrested and they'll be going straight back to prison, and it's as simple and straightforward as that.
Yeah, and I know from meetings with, particularly with neighbourhood patrols, that is one of the things that they would be picking up on a daily basis. Yeah. Great. Okay, thank you. And I think we can move on to the inspection report, I think, is next. I don't know, we've got slides. Yes, we have. Brilliant. Just before you start, Deputy Chief Constable, we have had a question. We did have a question in, which I said at the beginning about not addressing individual cases, but we did have a question about vetting processes that might apply before someone begins work. I just wondered whether because it kind of would fall under one of the inspection processes, whether you could just, during the course of talking us through these slides, just talk us through the process and how it works at the moment, and also whether there's anything that might be looked at or changes that might be taking place in light of the Home Secretary's remarks around vetting that were made, I think, only yesterday. And also I know that we've got our own inspection report around effectiveness and vetting. You probably can't say very much about that specifically, other than to point to the fact that it's coming and will be published presumably in due course. But if you could, when you're talking us through these slides, just refer to that. And some of these slides I think we may have seen before, so just again, just if you can point to some highlights, if you could, that would be great.
Yeah, okay, that's no problem at all. Just making sure. Yeah, okay, right. So I may as well pick up the vetting one first, if that's all right. Of course. Since the question's been asked, so we don't lose the thread. So I think the first point is the context that policing has operated in. As we know, it needs no repeating, does it? Some of the abhorrent behaviour by police officers and police staff in some cases. And therefore, we need to make sure that the people that we recruit into the organisation, regardless of role, but incredibly important for police officers, are the right people. That being said, it's recognised that vetting is only the first high bar to prevent people getting into the service that shouldn't be here. Otherwise, I wouldn't need a professional standards department to then pick up the investigations and all the rest of it. So it is only the high bar. we follow, so nationally, APP, approved professional practice, authorised professional practice, issued by the College of Policing, is what sets out the guidance and framework for how we need to vet people. And that includes very specific guidance about the different levels of vetting that are required. It talks about checks on the individual, but not only that, checks on families where somebody might live, some associations they might have, any broader vulnerabilities that they may have. That might include debt. It could include any mental health vulnerabilities. It could include a whole range of different considerations taken in the round, which then allows the force vetting manager, who in the vast majority of cases is the decision maker, to make a decision about whether a person can work in policing. So although the integrity inspection that's only just arrived, so that the inspection took place from the 1st of July onwards, with the field work taking place before that, we're currently in a checking period that we get back to HMIC with any factual errors. I think it's fair to say North Yorkshire Police, and I was confident that our approach to vetting would reflect well in that report. And without disclosing anything, I don't think there's anything I've read that would challenge that assumption at the moment. But it's a very complex area that requires a high level of professionalism and balanced decision making. And a lot of it is tested in terms of rationale and how that's written down. Sorry, I can see the chief wants to come in.
Just to reinforce what Scott says, one of the areas of vulnerability around vetting is transferee police officers. Nationally, that seems a threat, people transferring different forces to avoid scrutiny of sometimes poor behaviour, and there's been examples of that, not least of which Wayne Cousins. We attract a lot of transferees because it's a brilliant force and a brilliant place to work, and but we are a net importer of police officers from other forces in the country. We put in extra layers of scrutiny around transferees, and we actually interview on a vetting basis every single transferee that comes in. And I know that because when I joined the force earlier this year, I myself was subject to an interview about my motivations for joining North Yorkshire Police, and some detailed questions about, you know, my history, where I've been, what I've done, and I'm very confident in the vetting scrutiny that we have in this force now.
Great, thank you. And is there anything just on just the most recent, I don't know whether you've had a chance to digest the most recent announcements around changes to vetting that have come out of the Home Office this week? It may be just something we can pick up separately or in a future meeting.
Yeah, I think to digest them and reflect on what they actually say, because we in many respects, we've had the benefit of having one of the national leads for vetting in North Yorkshire Police, who's now working with the HMIC as one of their associates to ensure the framework's fit for purpose. So we have had a real national leading light helping us around vetting. So we do things that other forces currently don't do. If I can give you an example, we do a monthly wash across systems to make sure that there's no adverse information going on there about individuals. Not every force does that. They'll do it in different ways, but we're very innovative in how we go around it. So I think it's really important that that we digest that properly before we determine what that actually means for us. But we will follow the guidance and the legal framework, whatever it says. That's the important point. We won't diverge from that. Yeah.
Simon, did you want to come in?
Joe, yes, thanks. Just to kind of add to that, really, we should be well placed to build on the Home Secretary's aspirations. The intention, as I understand it, is to legislate for two of the things which touched on the points that both Scott and Tim have made. We expect there to be legislation to put the authorised professional practice, or parts of it, on a more formal legal footing, and secondly to adjust the misconduct regime so that it allows a smoother passage to exiting from the organisation individuals who find themselves on the receiving end of an adverse vetting finding whilst they're in service.
Great, thank you. Right, sorry, Scott, if you wanted to carry on. The thing that I was particularly interested in your slides was the ones, and there are quite a lot of them that say in progress. Just anything in terms of how that's tracked or what the time frame for those things is likely to be, because in progress probably doesn't tell us very much.
Yeah, so as you will find when you get HMIC inspections, some of the issues are fairly straightforward in terms of resolving. Some of them are a lot more complex in terms of culture, process, changing how we make an assessment of something, how we progress it through the organisation. Or when you get to the real difficult stuff, is building additional capabilities. So many of the AFIs might require, for example, there's one on here that we're seeking to resolve, which is how accurately we record antisocial behaviour. That's a matter of providing guidance to call takers at the front end. It's a matter of putting some assurance in, making sure people understand it. And then when you're at a level that your content people understand it, you can then submit the letter to the HMIC asking that you can discharge the AFI recommendation. That's a fairly simple example. Others take longer. So what I have the responsibility for leading is the improvement plan, if you like, against the AFIs and all the so areas for improvement or recommendations that come out of HMIC, but other third-party reporting as well. That is delivered through the Assistant Chief Constables, and then we allocate those actions and activity to Chief Superintendents. And out of that comes a milestone plan. So within those milestone plans, we can see that the majority of the work that we're undertaking at the moment will be resolved around late winter, early spring next year, just because of some of the changes that we've got to do. Educating, training, increasing awareness of the workforce, for example, on submitting safeguarding referrals is not an overnight fix. And I would be very suspicious of things that we could say we've resolved in 4 weeks and there's the letter, because it won't stick. And the other thing that I insist on is we have clear assurance that what we say we're doing. And if we haven't got it, then we won't be submitting a letter. We understand how we need to improve. We understand the timescales. So the majority of the peel, so the last peel report was issued in October, November of last year. The majority of peel AFIs we are aiming to resolve by late winter, probably around February time, something of that nature. Some will be earlier. And the reason for that is because that we believe that our next peel will be in the autumn of next year. I think the Home Office have been fairly clear. They don't want forces to go more than 2 years without a peel inspection. We've been involved in the consultation of the new framework. We know what's coming. Some of it's changed, some of it hasn't. Some of it, I think, will be fairly consistent and predictable. But we've already invited HMIC into the organisation in the early part of next year for us to show and tell and say, this is how we've addressed the AFIs and the peel, and this is what we'll be submitting to you to ensure that we can discharge those prior to the next inspection is going to be really important. The way it's governed is I chair the Risk and Assurance Board on behalf of the force, and each of the other chief officers has their own portfolio meetings where they have clear allocation of the areas improvement to them. And then there's a support through our corporate services function that tracks that on my behalf, basically, in the chief's behalf. So that's the kind of process, but it's very detailed work. And when you're working on a problem that goes right across the organisation, you've got to ensure that what you're saying is happening, and there's a reality to it. And we don't fall in the trap of thinking something's happening without us getting our own assurance on it.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you, Chief Constable.
You're on mute, Chief.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, in the interest of transparency, there is an open invitation to your performance and scrutiny team to attend and observe the Risk and Assurance Board that Scott holds and the force performance meeting that takes place monthly, where we get into the real detail around some of the challenges that we face at the force. You know, the dynamic nature of what we do is that there will always be areas that require focus to improve, and you keep going round. And you know, we spend a lot of time going into the detail of this, but there's an open invitation to your office.
Great, that's really helpful. My instinct is that we don't need to go through these slides because they're available anyway. Scott, unless there was something in particular that you thought you should highlight, I'd be inclined to move on. You're also on mute.
Sorry, I've done it now. No, it's not something that's not picked out. I think there's a couple of areas probably. The custody one, you can see around half the recommendations AFIs have been discharged. The other majority are longer term estates issues that we need to resolve. We've done a lot of the early risk ones that come out of that inspection. Interestingly, there won't be a separate custody inspection moving forward. That will be part of Peel. So there'll be a lot going on during the Peel inspections, because custody ones can be very resource intensive, but quite rightly so. It's a high risk area of business. And then the other one probably just to mention is the enduring National Child Protection Inspection one around investigation. Some of the complexity around that is simply because it's in the partnership arena, and it's one element which is improving the investigations around child protection. We don't do that alone. We do that with, as you know, local authority, children's, and making sure we have absolutely assurance around the sharing of information in that environment consistently is where we're working with partners on. The vast majority of AFI has been addressed. There's one element that we recognise we've got to keep improving with partners. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Simon, do you want to come in before we move on?
Just a brief remark to kind of complement what the Chief and the Dep have both said, but just to remind those that tune into this as very much the shop front of your scrutiny. Behind the scenes, we work very closely with HMIC, and doing so from an OPCC point of view is best practice and has stood PCCs and deputy mayors in good stead in terms of a journey towards outstanding performance in the police force. It's an area of real best practice, and it's part and parcel of our assurance framework, and indeed a big part of what Tamara Stevens does in her directorship responsibilities. So, and we're grateful to HMI for the very constructive engagement that we get from their liaison lead, and of course from the inspectorate teams themselves.
Great, thank you. I think we can move on to the public questions. I think there are two, and I think there is a slide. Yeah, great. So we actually had a number of emails on the same matter, who I think had been contacting us via the Guide Dogs charity, who were concerned about the illegal antisocial use of e-scooters, and I think these were private e-scooters rather than those the ones that were previously publicly ones that you could just pick up off the street, and the impact that they were having on blind and partially sighted people, and just whether there's anything that we can say to reassure people around the illegal use of those scooters in public places, because it's obviously concerning quite a lot of people across the patch at the moment.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'll answer that. Firstly, if people are using these scooters, particularly around people who are blind and partially sighted, that's completely abhorrent, and shows a complete lack of respect. And absolutely, we're committed to doing something about that. E-scooters are a fairly new phenomenon. Obviously, different cities up and down the country suffer from this issue. What we've done in North Yorkshire is we have a dedicated e-scooter Spock, who's a roads policing sergeant. He's delivered uplift training to our MPTs across the force, and does engage with partners around sale and the legislation around them. And if we see people riding these scooters, we will deal with them. The simple fact of the matter is these are a motor vehicle. This is not like a scooter that you give your 10-year-old child for a birthday present, they are motor vehicles. You need a driving licence to lawfully use one. No insurance company will insure them. So in short, if you've got one and you ride it on the road or the footpath, you commit an offence. It's important to say that. You're absolutely right that I understand it's before I came to North Yorkshire that there was an e-scooter rental scheme in York that's now stopped operating.
Yeah.
Well, that means quite simply is if you're seen riding an e-scooter in York on the road, on the footpath, that's illegal and we'll take action against you. We get relatively few reports, and I think I just finished with that saying we do take this seriously. If people, you know, are the victim of antisocial behaviour, we do want to know about it. They've got a description of the person, the description of the e-scooter. We can then look for CCTV, and you know, if we can get the evidence together, we will do something about it.
Yeah, I just wrote that down while you were talking, just the importance of people reporting incidents when they come across them, either themselves or anyone who is with them who is able to report or gather any evidence via as you say, video evidence or phones that might enable the police to identify who the perpetrators might be. But yes, thank you, that's really helpful. And I think we have one other question. Emma, who is in York, about violence against women and girls. I think alongside this question there was another element which we've responded to separately because it related to a specific incident that we've dealt with as a piece of casework. But this was about the NPCC report in July around the scale of violence against women and girls and the impact on policing and the whole system approach. I mean, the Chief Constable will know that I bang on about this a lot, and it will certainly be something that will be pulled out as part of the policing crime plan work that is going on at the moment in terms of that public consultation. But obviously the force already have a violence against women and girls strategy that they are working with. So just anything you can add in terms of that whole system approach and the police service.
Well, I mean, first of all, I can assure the public that you do talk about this a lot, but by the same token, as someone who's been in policing 28 years now, and I've dealt with everything from domestic violence through to domestic homicide through to rapes, I have seen the sharp end and the worst of violence against women and girls, and I am absolutely determined to do something about it. I think it's a fairly short answer to this. It is a whole system approach. You know, it's thinking about everything, about how we can work together in partnership to protect women and girls, not just from the serious end of violence, but the unpleasant behaviour, the misogynistic behaviour that makes people feel less safe. And we're absolutely determined to do that. So certainly the NPCC that was report that came out in July, any learning that comes out of that, we will continue to incorporate into our strategy going forward. I want North Yorkshire Police to be a learning organisation, and you know, if there are issues we can pick up from effective practice in other parts of the country and indeed internationally, I am more than happy for that to be part of what we do here.
Great, thank you. And I would certainly just add that the briefings that I've had around Opsateria, and yesterday I spent a good chunk of the day with justice colleagues in the police force, just understanding how the wider justice picture fits into this agenda among other agendas, the challenges that we know the wider justice sector has around the court system, the charging decisions and the evidence base that the CPS require to pull things forward. It is really difficult, and I think the thing that I took away both from Opsateria and from my meetings yesterday with justice colleagues was around the importance of having kind of honest and transparent conversations with victims and ensuring that victims are at the heart of our conversations with them about any incidents that have happened to them. So that we are both having a whole system approach, but also we're being victim focused and victim centred in the way in which we're working with people to ensure that people are able to cope and recover from things that have happened to them, regardless of a criminal justice process that may be ongoing or may not be, depending on what the evidence base is. Scott, did you want to come back as well?
Yeah. Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I think that important point is North Yorkshire Police have been no different to anyone else in having to uplift significant capability around safeguarding both child and adult, but the majority of victims in that environment are women and girls. We know that, and therefore it's incumbent on us as senior leaders to recognise that and to ensure that these issues and significant issues are properly resourced in terms of investigation and partnership working. That remains an enduring challenge. We're just, I think that, Chief would say, going to go into discussions about what the operating model for the force is for next year. And there's no doubt about it, there's enduring pressure and demand around safeguarding that we simply won't and can't ignore. And previously, certainly over the past 18 months, a significant realignment. I think thinking back last year, multi-million pounds worth realignment of resources from certain areas of the force into safeguarding, absolutely rightly to do, and a much closer realignment of resources to where the threat and risk is, and that continues. That will continue as most forces you will see doing.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So just that is, I think, the last question that we needed to deal with publicly. Other questions have been picked up outside of this public forum, or we picked up during the relevant section of the meeting today. Thank you to everyone for attending, and just to remind people once again that the consultation is ongoing into police, fire and crime priorities for the next 4 years. The closing date is the 18th of November, and people can take part via yourpoliceandfire.com. And I would urge everyone to do that either individually or through their own organisations that they may work with, to ensure that we get really good representation across demographics, but also across the geography of the region. Thank you everyone for your time this afternoon. And the next meeting, oh my goodness, Amanda, you told me this earlier and I've forgotten, is in November, but I can't remember when. I did write it down, and will be with fire colleagues. So apologies, it'll be on the website when it is, because I can't remember. And we'll be with fire colleagues. I don't know whether there's a theme, but it will be listed on the website, and we will look forward to seeing people then.